Welcome to the Boxing Source Podcast, where we go over the latest news in boxing and react to all of the fights that happened in the past week. Now, let's go to our host, J.R. Bell. Yo, what's going on, everybody? What's happening, y'all? We are here live for Sunday, May 3rd, 2026, here for this edition of the Boxing Source Podcast. So there's going to be a lot here that we're going to be catching up on in this edition of the Boxing Source Podcast, but this one is starting a new season. That's right. We're starting a new season of the Boxing Source Podcast, allegedly the longest running boxing podcast in existence. Okay. The first ever podcast that we had was back in May of 2015. That's right. May 2015. I'm kind of sure that y'all may know what happened within the first weekend of May in 2015. There was a super fight of sorts that happened in Las Vegas at that time, right? And after that particular matchup, that was when we had our first Boxing Source podcast. At the time, it was the Boxing Source radio show, and it was on Blog Talk Radio. That's right. It was on Blog Talk Radio, and for May 3rd, 2015, we pretty much had like a test run of a podcast there on Blog Talk Radio, and pretty much on a consistent basis since then, we have had one show pretty much every Sunday, as many times as we could from 2015 up until now. Okay, so that's been more than 10 years that we have had a podcast on here for the Boxing Source. All right. But we wanted to go through a few things here on this particular podcast, man. We had a lot of action that did take place on Saturday. I was out in location for the Pro Box card on Friday night, so we will see if we could touch on that as well here on the Boxing Source podcast. But we have a lot of things here that we're going to be going over when it comes to what happened at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas and also at the Tokyo Dome in Japan. So we're going to get into it as far as like what happened at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, because man, we had something that a number of people did not expect. I kind of like expected it, but I thought it would happen a little bit later. And that was the whole thing with David Benavidez getting that win over Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez for the unified championships there at Cruiserweight. Yep, that's right. You had David Benavidez in there in the Cruiserweight division, his pro debut, as they say. His debut in the Cruiserweight division going up against Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, who only had that lone loss or whatever it was to Dimitri Bivol at 175 pounds, but he had been a world champion at 168, moved up to 175, and then after having his stint at 175, went up to the Cruiserweight division. And when he went up to the Cruiserweight division, he defeated Arslan Gulumarian to win one of the world championships, and then he had the fight over in Saudi Arabia against Chris Billum-Smith to win another world championship, right? And then following that, he did defeat Junior Dorchakos. That was last year, last summer, there over in California. And, a number of people felt like, hey, would it be like either him or Jao Pasaya as the top fighter there in the Cruiserweight division? But you can see like after about four fights or so, Zurdo Ramirez had been already a unified champion at Cruiserweight. But you had David Benavidez has been a champion there at 168 pounds, had been the youngest super middleweight champion when he first captured it at 168. Had a little incident where he ended up losing the title, but got it back, And after, having his run at 168, he tried his luck there at 175, had a couple of fights there at 175. And, after his win over Anthony Yard, stopping Anthony Yard over in Saudi Arabia last November, it was, okay, what would be next out there for him? At the time, he was looking to see if he could get the top fights at 175 or see if he could get the top fighter at 175. But as you see, it didn't necessarily happen. I mean, that's, how he, got the WBC title there at 175 pounds. Yeah, that's right, light heavyweight, because remember, they were supposed to be a undisputed champion there at light heavyweight, but after that person had a rematch where he won the rematch, thing there for DC and well, that guy, which will be mentioned here later, he didn't, go through with that mandatory, and he didn't go through with what they were trying to intend for him to do. And now he's lined up for a fight against somebody that's not either one of the guys that fight fans wanted him to fight. But yeah, we'll get into that. But let's focus on David Benavidez. All right. So David Benavidez, they're coming into this bout against Zurdo Ramirez, undefeated. Has been mentioned in the pound for pound rankings, probably like in the bottom half of the top 10 for a number of folks out there. The boxing source. We don't necessarily have a pound for pound top 10. No, we don't have that. We have a boxing source pound for pound top 16. So, all of those folks that have maybe the top 10, and then they have, hey, maybe we got a guy that would be outside the top 10, or maybe two fighters outside the top 10. No. We don't have that. We have the pound for pound top 16. All right. So we'll be getting into that as here in this live portion of the Boxing Source podcast. We do respond to live chat. We give a shout out to those participating in the live chat, like Jesus said in the building. Here on the live chat, chiming in, and he has a question there. Is David Benavidez top 5 pound for pound? Okay, we'll get into that, but we gotta get into this fight because it was something where, okay, there was a lot, behind this fight, given the timing. We have it at, as they say, Cinco de Mayo weekend, or the first weekend of May. And, we hadn't necessarily had something going on in Las Vegas like that for a year or so. I mean, well, when it comes to, Mexican fighters, right? Because technically, you did have someone fighting last year on a Saturday, so to speak, in Santoso Alvarez Barragan. But he wasn't fighting in Las Vegas. He was fighting in Saudi Arabia at the time against William Skull. So what ended up happening was you had that fight on Sunday of last year. You had Naoya Inoue in Las Vegas. But now, fast forward to, now you got David Benavidez getting that spot, going up against Zurdo Ramirez. You know what I mean? And, the guy with Zurdo, he was there, of course, as I mentioned, an established unified champion at cruiserweight. Went in there as, weighed in under the cruiserweight limit around 199 or something like that. So, you had to see what Benavidez could do there within cruiserweight, as this ain't 175. He ain't necessarily, competing there at 175 pounds, but he's going to be competing there at a higher weight class. But for those that kind of like have been familiar with David Benavidez over the course of his professional career and how he started his professional career, he had pretty much been working his way down to the weight that he started his career at. So here at this point, you got David Benavidez that's coming in at, as they say, his career high. He's there at 20 pounds or 22 pounds more than his last bout against Anthony Yard. But as many people may know, like David Benavidez had been bigger, coming down in weight. So now, getting that, higher in age and stuff like that, how it is tougher to, get the pounds off. Me myself, I'm, over there, like, getting close to the having the 5-0 or something like that. Not that close. Now, I'm still a ways from that, but you kind of like know that with your metabolism, it'll take a little bit more for you to get the pounds down, right? So even as an athlete, even as folks that have a lot, that do a lot when it comes to exercise, calisthenics, all that type of stuff, it still is very difficult for you to keep the weight down. So for David Benavidez, him and his fights that he had in 175 pounds, he had to get down to wherever he was to get to that 175-pound limit. Now for cruiserweight, where the limit is 200 pounds, so you got a 25-pound weight discrepancy or range that you could be around. It's like, oh man, you know what? Man, I ain't even got to cut that much weight. Oh man, I'm good. So hey, once I get around that range where I ain't really got to worry about cutting down that much weight, oh man, I'm all right. So that's kind of like how David Benavidez approached this bout here against Zurdo Ramirez. You feel me? Jesus Zim here says he gives credit to Zurdo staying in the pocket. They're dishing out the punches to Benavidez. And he talks about a couple of occasions there on that one. And yeah, I'll get into that here because you had David Benavidez, man. And I'm telling you, he went out there and he did what he said that he was going to do. Okay. A number of people, talk about these two guys, having a sense of familiarity with each other from years back. Having these sparring sessions, working, with each other as they, competed for world titles in the past, whether it's at 168 or 175, for either guy, because they've been in 168, 175, and cruiserweight, but David Benavidez kind of like looked at that and said, okay, you know what? I know what Zurdo's about, but I've kind of grown as a fighter. And I don't think he's ready for, what I have in store for him. And you can see that they both have respect for each other and everything like that. For David Benavidez, he's like, hey, man, I like this guy and things like that, but I'm going in there and I'm going to hurt him. I'm going to hurt him on Saturday night. And that's exactly what you see. You kind of like seeing that from the first round, man. You've seen that from the first round. Those combinations that a lot of people are familiar with David Benavidez, you've seen that early. And by the second round, you've seen like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 punch combinations from David Benavidez, like pretty much like going into the end of the second and third rounds and stuff like that. You've seen 6 punch combinations. You've seen 5 punch combinations. You've seen 4 punch combinations. And you really didn't have much of an answer there from Zurdo from early. And I'm like, when I saw that, I was like, man, this ain't gonna look good at all. This ain't gonna look good at all. And for Zurdo, it was like, hey, you're supposed to be in here as they say the bigger fighter because you're the one that has had the more experience there in the cruiserweight division. So yeah, you could weigh in, make sure you make the weight there for the cruiserweight limit. But once you rehydrate, see if you rehydrate to a point where you'll be comfortable and be able to use your size or whatever it is to kind of like wear down the guy here in David Benavidez. But man, that ain't even work. Man, that ain't work at all. Oh man, that ain't work at all. And I'm gonna say this, right? From like the big lead or whatever it is that David Benavidez had in the first couple of rounds or the first 3 rounds. Before that first knockdown that happened in round 4, you just see that David Benavidez was better than Zurdo Ramirez on all facets of the game. Okay? You talk about speed, power, quickness, toughness, all of that stuff. That was David Benavidez because he went in there and he wanted to make a statement, right? My thing was if there was any type of thing that Zurdo Ramirez could have did here for this fight against Benavidez was try to, wear Benavidez down on the inside, try to grab him try to have him in close quarters, try to get some work in there, right? But what I see from Benavidez was him working out of clinches or potential clinches and throwing while being in close quarters. And when I see like the left hook that he threw in close quarters, and he just like turned a little bit off that hook and landed flush on Zurdo's chin, I was like, oh man, this thing is about to be over. It's about to be over. And man, when I just seen like the combinations just kept going there from David Benavidez, and you seen what was happening there in the fourth round, and it was just that to the point where Zurdo Ramirez just had no answer, and he just went down there for that first time, went down on one knee, and he was like, "Man, this punishment is just absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane." So I was like, "Man, what could Zurdo even do to really get back in this?" And I just didn't see it. There was like no elements there. I didn't know what was going on in the corner there for Zurdo Ramirez, within rounds 3 or rounds 4, especially after that first knockdown in round 4. Because listen, man, either you're gonna be trying to have a high guard and block punches with your face, or you're gonna have to see about answering what Benavidez is throwing by throwing shots of your own. And, like Jesus Sim was talking about, Zurdo at times he was, staying in the pocket, dishing out punches to Benavidez and had David, back up a little bit, on a couple of occasions. Yeah. But, that was mainly an answer to Benavidez combination punching. And it was almost like at that time he was, after seeing what was happening in those first few rounds, he was like, man, fuck this shit, man. Hey, I'm gonna have to, really get down and dirty or get in the gritty, to try to see if I can land some power shots. Because if it's like, within a distance or a good distance, I ain't really gonna have much of a shot because I can't really like, throw with them as far as like combination. I can't throw with them. So if I have to take about a couple of shots or 3 or maybe, see if I could find out what Benavidez is throwing and then, come back with one, see if I can land something good. Yeah, I'll take that risk. But from mid range and the distance, Zurdo had no shot. He had absolutely no shot there in this fight. So for him, it was more about him trying to get in within range. And the thing about it is, if you're going to be, yeah, you can be the taller fighter. Yeah, you can have some type of thing as far as like your reach advantage if you have that type of reach advantage. But if you're if you're a lot slower than your opponent, if you can't throw combinations anywhere close to the speed of your opponent, you ain't gonna have much of a shot, especially if you're not good with the head movement, if you're not good slipping, if you're not good, kind of, trying to see if you can anticipate the punch that your opponent is throwing and say, okay, like if you got, for example, someone throwing a hook and they're used to throwing a hook. So you're like saying, okay, I can see that he's going to be throwing a hook. So once I see that motion going, I could slip that hook and then turn around and throw something back. But with Benavidez, he has like an offensive repertoire where he could, throw multiple punches, whether it's hooks, straights, uppercuts, and also add feints to it to where he look like he'll throw a jab, but then come around with the hook. So even if you have a high guard, he could look like he's leaning in for a jab and then turn it and then land the hook that'll be around the guard. So that's what you see there from David Benavidez. And it was like an absolute destruction. Like within 4 rounds, you could see that Zurdo Ramirez's nose was like almost in shambles, right? So after that, you see that first knockdown there in the 4th round where Zurdo kind of like took a knee. Then in the 5th round, he went back out there and he was throwing, he was throwing a little bit. He was landing some punches and stuff like that. But at the time, I was like, yeah, Zurdo's doing well in this 5th round. But is it because David Benavidez is kind of toning it down a little bit as far as like using his energy. And I just went into that sixth round, and you just seen Benavidez pick up that offensive activity again, and Zurdo just didn't have an answer at all for it. No answer at all for it. And before the end of the sixth round, you've seen another one of those combinations from David Benavidez, and it was just that there was a lot of emphasis behind those punches. I'm telling you, that right there, like, it's one thing to have power behind your punch, but it's another thing to have that speed and the snap and it being sharp. Because when you see that happen, it's like, oh my goodness, you know what I mean? So you've seen a combination that pretty much like damaged the eye of Zurdo Ramirez there before the end of the sixth, and Zurdo Ramirez like went, he kind of like was tapping his eye, back it up, tapping his eye, and then he just took a knee. And after taking that knee, he pretty much made the decision at that time, man, like, hey, should I continue going through this? Should I continue to to continue to get punished? You know what I'm saying? And he made that decision to say, you know what, I ain't gonna get up. I'm not gonna get up, man. This thing is over. I can't really do much of nothing here. So it's like, what's the point of me getting up if I ain't gonna be having much of a chance of winning this fight? So before the end of the sixth round, your referee there ended up calling the bout there for a KO victory in favor of David Benavidez for him to win the WBA and WBO Cruiserweight Championships. And he is now 32-0. I want to bring in one of our great panelists here on the Boxing Source podcast that's going to be joining in. He's been, one of them day ones since 2015 there in the building. You know what I'm saying? I got my guy, the Boxing Academic, is here. What's going on, Boxing Academic?
Not much. How you doing tonight, JR?
All good, man. All good. Hey, man, it's been 11 years, bro. 11 years doing a podcast, man. It's just crazy, bro. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, man. It's been a while. It's been a while. You definitely my brother, man, and I appreciate you for giving me something to do for 11 years.
Yeah, no doubt, man. We've been able to chop it up about this sport. We've been able to cover a few events here on this sport and things like that, man. And like I said, man, you've been one of them day ones and rocking with me ever since, man. And I appreciate that for sure, man.
Of course, we got more years to do it.
Yes, sir, man. So, I gave my, first assessment there of the fight between David Benavidez and Zurdo Ramirez, where it was just an absolute destruction by David Benavidez there. And I just said that, after those first couple of rounds, Zurdo had absolutely no shot there to really like get in the fight there. So, what were your assessments of what you see there in the ring between both of those combatants?
So, whenever you ask me about this fight, I never to me, it wasn't something that I felt like I should give much thought, because the things that I see Zurdo do happens to be the things that Benavidez can take advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said, I said Benavidez was going to win. I don't know if I predicted a knockout or not, but what I'm saying is I didn't feel like it was even worth me to like look into the fight, because I knew Benavidez should win, fairly easily.
Yeah, you said it would be like 90-10 or 95-5 or something. Whatever.
Oh, that's what I said?
Well, not necessarily, but it's kind of like, how they have some fights of this magnitude where, there could be a lot of attention, towards the fight, and that maybe it could be like a 50-50 fight or, 60-40
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But this here, it's like, nah, they ain't no 60-40.
Yes. It was nowhere near even. And so it kind of baffled me last night. Like, I get everybody has their opinion. Zurdo is a real fighter. There are a lot of things that could make you think that the fight would have went a certain way. But I was just so confused, and like people were telling me like, well, I didn't watch Zurdo for years. And I'm like, well, shit, if you didn't watch him, you couldn't have predicted that that it wasn't gonna end well against this guy, like maybe a different guy. Let's say if he fought Caleb Plant, be a different story. It might be a great fight.
Mm-hmm.
But this guy, well, Caleb Plant wouldn't go up that high. Let me be the first one to say that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm just saying stylistically, if he fought somebody like Caleb Plant, we would be talking a completely different story.
Word.
Um, and so the things that Zurdo does that made him right for Benavidez are his fighting style. So
Yeah.
Zurdo has a fighting style that I would relate to Chris Algieri. He's the cruiserweight Chris Algieri, in that when he fights, you know how Chris Algieri sort of has a finesse style, and he never really, like, Chris Algieri was a good fighter. You could tell he was a very cerebral fighter, but he was not able to put power on his shots and just like make somebody be like, oh damn, let me just straight respect him. And if I had to guess, a lot of his bigger fights were not stoppages. I think he got 30 knockouts in like 50 fights, which is a decent knockout percentage. But when he fought the better people, the fight went 12 rounds. You're muted. Still can't hear you unless something wrong on my side. You hear me? I can't hear you if you're saying something. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm not hearing you. Whenever you move your lips, I don't hear anything. And you shook your head to hearing me. Whatever you're saying, I can't hear you. Can you ask the chat if they can hear you? Yeah, I'm not sure if you want me to like keep talking or just wait till you get it together. Oh, the chat said they can't hear you. On the volume button, sometimes when I do speakerphone or earpiece, it doesn't work. I have to do default. So can you switch it to default? Yeah, I don't think nobody can hear you, JR. I thought I might have heard something, but nah. Do you want me to continue what I was saying till you get it? Yes, okay. So the things that Zurdo doesn't do well, or the things that he does, is that he has a style that is a finesse style. So he's not able to put together hard punches that he would need to get somebody like David Benavidez off of him. And that's been the issue. Like that's the only reason why the fight that we went to in Vegas with Ronnie Shields fighter, but I forgot his name. But whatever the fighter was that he beat in Vegas, that he hurt David Benavidez at the end. If you don't have power to like hurt him like that, then David Benavidez is going to overwhelm you, and that's just it. Just is what it is. So Zurdo is a finesse fighter, so he don't got power. So that's a strike against him right there. When he blocks and stuff, he doesn't use like head movement for real. He just kind of keeps his hands up. And so with his long arms, it's sort of the same issue that Wilder has when he blocks punches. Like the alternative is like a Canelo. When Canelo put his arms up, his arms are blocking everything because he got big, massive, biceps and big, massive forearms, and so it blocks punches. But then when you have somebody like Zurdo with these big, long, lanky arms, like it's just too much air. It's too much air for somebody's hands to get around, and so he don't block punches. His hands just kind of there, and then yeah, it's a few other things, but to me, when I looked at those things, it just equated that it wasn't going to end well against Benavidez because there was nothing like unless Benavidez got hurt or he became chinny all of a sudden. That's the only way that he could have really just affected Benavidez if somehow Benavidez was chinny. But I mean, Benavidez has shown a pretty good ability to take punishment. So he went in and he essentially was able to win almost every round. I mean, there was one round that that he did have some success. He being the opponent, and it like even after that success, I think he got knocked out. He had success in round 5, and then he got knocked out in round 6. So yeah, I don't know. JR, is your audio back together? Still can't hear you. Time out. Okay.
All right. Now, now we should be back cracking. We should be back cracking, y'all. We should be back cracking. Hopefully y'all are able to see me. Hold on just a minute, y'all. Hold on. All right, we should be back. We should be
Yep.
back on here. We should be
We
back
got you.
on here. Able to hear
Yeah, I
me?
can hear you.
All right, yeah, for sure. Yeah, now we back. Now we back. All right, yeah. So I mean, you were talking about the whole thing there with Zurdo Ramirez and what he's had as far as like his fights. 50 total professional fights, 48 wins, and as you said, 30 knockouts there. And it looked like for the majority of the time that he was at super middleweight and up, that he was winning, but he was winning by unanimous decision. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't something where, uh, as they say, man, he wasn't going to like out. I guess like either you had to outwork Benavidez or you had to have something where his punches would make Benavidez respect him. You know what I mean? So we didn't necessarily see that early there from Zurdo Ramirez. Even though we had some instances where during exchanges he did land flush on David Benavidez, but it did deter David Benavidez from continuing to move forward. And that was the thing. It was like Benavidez was the one moving forward, not Zurdo Ramirez, but Zurdo Ramirez is supposed to be the established guy in the cruiserweight division. You know what I mean? Shout out to
And
Daisy Sanchez there on the comment real quick. He said that Zurdo is fresh from surgery, plus sparring partners. He said not surprised that Benavidez chose him instead of John Obataia. I'll get into that here a little bit, but Academic, you had something more here.
Yeah, so the things with Zurdo's defense, it it did not bode well with an offensive fighter like Benavidez. And so an offensive fighter meaning that if you let Benavidez sit there and throw punches, it's no different than Fundora. You can't let Fundora sit there and hit you with punches. You can't let Benavidez sit there and I heard Tim Bradley, he called it motorboat or something like that. You
Mm,
can't let him sit there and motorboat you because even though motorboat sound weird, it's exactly what it is. He hitting you with 1,000 punches and like another thing that I knew was going to bode well for Benavidez is that the power that he generates off of the acceleration that he delivers, it makes his punches that much more effective. Are they the most thudding shots? Some of them seem to be because he throw them hard, like shots like that. But
hmm
outside of them, he throws fast shots, and that is exactly what makes his shots hard. And so y'all made a comment that that, or maybe Matt made a comment, but he saw all of the punches, but he still couldn't do nothing.
No,
Them like I don't know. When he got hit with the same thing that Porky Medina got hit with, he didn't see that.
yeah,
He saw most of them, but them ones where he speed bagging his ass,
yeah,
that's crazy.
yeah, yeah. And I think that was something that maybe Benavidez was confident of. But like I said with Zurdo, even with the work that he's done there in the cruiserweight division, it's not like he had that next element of okay, yeah, I'm better than these guys, but I want to show that I'm much better than these guys. He doesn't necessarily have that element. David Benavidez kind of like has that element. You see that in him. You know what I mean? So I would say he would have to get to the point where Benavidez would have to like say, "Hey, you know what? I know this guy really can't keep up with me, but I'm going to show everybody why he can't keep up with me." You know, when I was talking about the lead up to this fight and the whole thing with the odds and stuff like that, I brought it up because yeah, it was Benavidez's first fight in a cruiserweight division, but he was still like a significant favorite. I was talking about like 4.5 to 1, around like 4 to 1, 4.5, or 5 to 1. And I compared it to what the fight was on January 31st, that headline at Madison Square Garden between Shakur Stevenson and Teofimo Lopez, and they had Shakur Stevenson first fight at 140 pounds against the established fighter there at 140 in Teofimo Lopez, but they had Shakur Stevenson favored around that 3.5, 4 to 1. Now he was able to show why he was favored, but that was like a time where that was as they were building it up to be a high profile fight. A lot of people had their eyes on what was going to be going on in the ring, and there was an opportunity for Shakur Stevenson to kind of like show that okay, yeah, I am that guy. But what I said then after that fight was that Shakur Stevenson had a very, very good performance, but it was kind of similar to his fight against William Zepeda, where, yeah, he was outpointing him. Zepeda really didn't have no answer. But by the time it was the second half of the fight, you see Shakur Stevenson kind of tone down the activity a little bit. You see the same thing here, against Teofimo Lopez, where Shakur Stevenson was just beating him with the jab, but he didn't take it to that next level that says, okay, you know what? He would be really dangerous against any fighter within that division. You know what I'm saying? Here with David Benavidez and Zurdo Ramirez, Benavidez made it to be no doubts at all. No doubts at all. And so we said, you know what, man? I'm gonna punish this dude. I'm gonna punish him. I'm gonna show y'all that I'm gonna like just beat him from pillar to post. And from that being said, that I'm the much better fighter on all aspects there. Daisy Sanchez there was referred to Zurdo Ramirez and him being out for a while after his bout against Junior Dorticos due to like a shoulder injury or something like that. So he was like get back in the mix on that front. And shout out to Bruce Gas there on the live chat as well. Now, as far as like going into the fight, there the mentality of both of these fighters, that was another thing that kind of like said, you know what, Benavidez is going to win this fight. Now, I had like a whole thing with the like prediction or whatever it is, like making picks and stuff like that. I forgot like how early it was when I did the prediction, but I already had like Benavidez winning, but I ain't have him winning like this. What kind of like got me though was in the days leading up to the fight, Armando Ramirez was talking like he had one foot out the door. Whether it was like, hey, okay, if I win, then I defend the titles, and then I could, eventually moved up to heavyweight. But he also said that, hey, I got one or two more fights left in me after this, and then I'm walking out. And I'm like, man, you can't necessarily be out in public making that type of statement because it kind of like gives like a instance of where, yeah, you might have a plan, but it's like, are you really motivated to try to really say, hey, I could be a step above of what maybe people expect of me? Because hey, if they're telling you you're an underdog against a guy that's coming up for 175, you should be like, nah, dude, I'm the bigger dude. I got these abilities. I proved that I've been like one of the best fighters there in the cruiserweight division. I can see what he did at 168. I can see what he did at 175. I know what we was doing there in the gym, but this is a whole different thing here, stepping in the ring for real. And I didn't really get that mentality there from Zurdo Ramirez. As I was mentioning there with David Benavidez, he said, listen, I'm going to step in that ring and I'm going to hurt him. And he did exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, them sparring as many times as they did, and you could tell Benavidez knew he had his number. Like it wasn't a lot Zurdo physically can do that would give him the matchup advantage against a Benavidez. Again, unless Benavidez was chinny, which he's not, that's the only thing that would have saved him is if Benavidez might have been chinny. But since he's not, you ain't gonna beat him in the speed arena. You so would he have done better had he boxed and tried to fight off the back foot?
Nah, nah. Because the thing with Zurdo is you could do that if you have at least some type of speed. But you can see that he was significantly slower than David Benavidez. So, like, even if he would try to, fight off his back foot or try to set a trap or something like that, he would still be getting hit with two or three punches before he could try to, throw something. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't think that would have been, good for him at all in this sense. And my thing is, when you're a taller fighter or you have a longer reach and you try to fight off your back foot, you're kind of like giving up that reach, to a certain extent. So I didn't think that would be a good move for him. Daisy says this says that Zurdo wasn't motivated. He looked like Mario Barrios against Ryan Garcia in February. He was just there to play a role. Oh man, he just said that he's just there to like hand over the belts or something like that. I don't know, man. Hey, I don't know if that was like a squash match or whatever, but hey, Zurdo Ramirez definitely did get squashed in that joint on Saturday, man. That was insane, man. Like anything else you might have on this fight academic?
Yeah, I just I'm baffled that people thought it was going to be a good fight just from historically watching Zurdo fight and just how close his. Okay, so let's say he win fights unanimous decisions. Okay, cool, but none of his fights ever just seemed like he was whitewashing people. And even the way that he boxed people and win, you just didn't get the sense that he was like winning like Floyd Mayweather or something, like winning
Yeah, like he made
or
it seem like
Shakur.
it's like no chance. Yeah, or like Shakur. Yeah, exactly, exactly. You would have a number of these fights, like I was saying, or like I was mentioning there with like Arsen Goulamarian. or like a Chris Billum Smith, or Junior Dorticos. Like, yeah, he has unanimous decision wins, and they'll be like, 8-4 or something like that, like 8 rounds to 4, maybe like a 9 rounds to 3 or something like that. But it's not like a 10-2 or an 11-1 or something where like he would score a knockdown or two en route to a decision victory. No, it's not necessarily like that. So you don't necessarily get that element from Zurdo Ramirez that he would have like a sense of dangerousness or something, behind him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's exactly what Benavidez had in the back of his mind. This guy can't hurt me, and I can hurt him. I'm finna get him out of here. That's what he told us. That's what he did.
Hmm. Let me address something here real quick on the chat. Someone, Alex here says, boxing media is protecting Benavidez from Opataya because they hate Dana White and Zufa. They're afraid of Jai. Okay, let me address this situation. We're talking about Jai Opataya, who has been in the cruiserweight division pretty much as long as Zurdo Ramirez has. Jai Opataya, has that win in order to, have that IBF belt when he had the IBF belt. Okay. So outside of that particular fight that he had against what it was, and this was Bears Brightest in 2024. Here where have been his fights. Jack Massey, David Naika, Claudio Squayo, and Hussein Sin Cara. That is before he had his bout against Brandon Glenn. So my thing is with Benavidez is just getting into the picture. But before all of that, Jai Opataya was having these fights at Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and over there in what is that, like New Zealand or something like that, or Australia? Yeah, Australia, right? So yeah, you could have that IBF belt. Yeah, you could hold the title of, at the time, Ring Magazine champion since he had defeated Maris Brightus. But since then, his resume ain't looking all too good at all. You feel me? So as far as like John Obatiah is concerned, he has to figure out that whole situation, with Ring Magazine and Zuffa and TKO or whatever, before they had this whole thing with you know, David Benavidez. Now, David Benavidez did make his comment there at the post-fight press conference in reference to Jai Opataya or whatever it is, but it was mainly about Zuffa. But the thing about it is, Opataya is open to facing some of these guys before that whole little situation between him and IBF happened, because he didn't really understand the situation, or his team didn't understand the situation. Now, with Zuffa, if you're going to have a guy that's a spokesman of Zuffa Boxing openly like criticize these other promoters or these other sanctioning bodies, yeah, that's going to be a problem if they're going to try to set up fights with these, guys that aren't necessarily involved with Zuffa. So while Jai Opataya says, hey, you know what, he's open to a fight with David Benavidez, you're going to have to deal with that whole Zuffa thing first. Because my thing is, hey, you're gonna have what it was. You already fought Brandon Glanton. They did sign Chris Billum Smith, and I think they have like another signing there in the cruiserweight division. But outside of that, who is going to be there for Jai Opataya to fight while under Zuffa Boxing? That's the main question. But everybody is going to be calling for, David Benavidez to be fighting Jai Opataya if Benavidez is going to be there in the cruiserweight division. But if you're going to have Jai Opataya there under Zuffa Boxing, good luck having that fight happen. Because, listen, you're just going to be having all of these events. It's going to go down once a month, at least now once a month, when it comes to Zuffa Boxing. And it's going to be either there in the apex, or we're going to see what happens here, I guess, within a couple of months, because we're supposed to be due for an announcement or two when it comes to Richardson Hitchens and with who's the guy there that's under uh that management team. Y'all know the super middleweight there, Edgar Berlanga, man. They're supposed to have fights announced here pretty soon. But outside of that, I don't know what the future is going to be here for Zuffa Boxing. We got what's coming up here for later this month, but outside of that, then yeah. Said they'll do it on the ring card and Netflix. Well, we can see if that happens, but with that, technically, I don't. I'll just say this, right? I don't count that as Zuffa. I would say it's part of the whole little TKO group conglomerate, right? Because TKO group has the whole thing with WWE, UFC, boxing with Zuffa in the US, but outside the US is like, TKO itself for Ring Magazine. So that could be possible, but we'll see how it goes. I would just have to see like how much they would put behind Jai Opataya to have a bout with David Benavidez. But I think what we've seen here from David Benavidez and how they kind of built this fight up makes David Benavidez a focal point here. I want to see like how people have like are responded to David Benavidez in his performance against Zurdo Ramirez, and if that gets him the popularity that could be necessary for him to be in position to have another fight in September. Because hey, it's one thing to have this thing for Cinco de Mayo weekend, but they're also looking at having them fight in Vegas in September. And well, Vegas is going to be open around that second weekend of September there because of the whole little Canelo thing, which y'all get into that. Because we did see Canelo Alvarez there in attendance at T-Mobile Arena. He was supporting, one of his guys, you know. But, they were talking with him. Jim Gray was chopping it up with him and all that type of stuff. And they made that announcement that he will be stepping in the ring to face Christian and Millie for the WBC Super Middleweight Championship, but it's going to be in Saudi Arabia. Um, and now, it looks like, what he's been able to see there in the ring live between, David Benavidez and Zurdo Ramirez, and they see like what David Benavidez is doing, then, hey, that's something right there. Shout out to Tim Bayless in the building. He told something that was talked about yesterday on Twitter Space, and hey, we might. I don't know, man. He says we want Deontay Wilder versus David Benavidez.
No, we don't. No, we don't. No, we don't.
Oh man! Woo! Oh man! Oh goodness! Oh wait! Yeah, I think he got cut a little bit. Man, hopefully they don't chip in around this thing with the stream. But hopefully, your academic is back. Yeah, he should be back here. Yeah, he's back. All right. So it was suggested as far as like Benavidez, if he would go up to the heavyweight division, that he could potentially face Deontay Wilder. Now, someone that is close to the camp of Deontay Wilder said that they would reach out to him and see what his interest level would be for a fight of that magnitude. Now, given the situation there for Deontay Wilder, and him having this bout against Derek Chisora at the beginning of April, right? Um, and that a potential bout that could have happened between him and Anthony Joshua, being next, that didn't necessarily happen. So with that, I would say, hey, maybe it could be within the cards or whatever. But hey, the math gotta math. But shout out to Tim Bayless in the building. He says it would be the biggest fight in boxing. Oh man, yeah, that would be great, man. Biggest fight in boxing. Hey, but hey, I would say this though. if there's something about big events, right? If you like announce a fight and it could involve a popular fighter or whatever it is, and given that their following could be like, okay, it don't really necessarily matter who that fighter goes up against, people are going to be interested in it. You know what I'm saying? But it's a whole nother thing if there is an announcement and fight fans will be like, oh shit, Wilder versus Benavidez would be like, oh shit. You know what I mean? Because it's like it would be something that a number of people probably wouldn't expect. But it's something where what Deontay Wilder is, you know what David Benavidez is. So if you match them two up, it's like, oh yeah, we gonna see a fight, you know. So that's kind of like the thing there, man. Said Daisy said, in your opinion, which fight was the best? You have to tell me like what joint would it be? Like, is it within that card in Las Vegas or throughout the whole weekend? What fight it was? So I need clarification on that thing there, man. Also says he says hope to see Navarrete and Espinoza. Well, we'll see because I heard Espinoza could be in a unification bout. He could be in a unification bout there against what the heartbreaker there in the heartbreaker in that division. So, oh man, if they do make that matchup, that would be really awesome there for the featherweight division. We are well overdue for a unification bout in the featherweight division. You know what I'm saying? So if we do have it where you could have the WBO champion there in Espinosa, and he goes up against Brandon Figueroa, who did beat Nick Ball for that WBA title. That would be something. Yeah, yeah. I would like that fight. Definitely like that fight. Oh, it said Vegas. Oh man. Now that's a good question. Cause that card last night, I was saying that card last night reminded me of February 1st of last year. Boxing Academic was out there for that fight card of February 1st. And you had some good fights on that one. But this one right here, man, you had Duarte versus Fierro. That was a close bout, so to speak. You had Jaime Munguia against Armando Resendiz. You had Lucero get upset by Ismael Flores. And you had the whole thing with Jorge Chavez versus Tito Sanchez, which could be a fight of the year candidate, man, because they was going at it. They was definitely going at it there for 10 rounds. So you had a number of good fights on there, man. Oh, that's a good question. I'm gonna say that it would have to be Chavez Sanchez. Two undefeated fighters. They were scrapping it out. It was really close until Sanchez kind of flipped things up in the second half of the fight and then just outworked Chavez and was able to score two knockdowns in order to get a knockout win there in the 10th round. But yeah, outside of that, man, it was a great card overall, man. Academic, was there like another performance there that kind of like impressed you before I go into like the co-feature?
None that none that stick out that I took exceptional note. I mean, it was good fights, but I didn't take exceptional notes. At least for a lot of the earlier fights.
Oh, word. So what about the thing with Jaime Munguia against Armando Resendiz? Because you had a Resendiz there. Was going in as the WBA super middleweight champion, had been elevated to WBA champion. There, of course, last year had the win over Caleb Plant, which was a serious candidate or a strong candidate for upset of the year last year. I thought he did a good job there against Caleb Plant in the second half of that fight. And for Jaime Munguia, this was, at least I'm thinking that it was his second bout that he had under Eddy Reynoso, because it would have been the first one I thought was his rematch against Bruno Sorachi, where he was able to score a decision win over Sorachi. there after getting knocked the fuck out. He had to get knocked the fuck out there in their first matchup. And for Munguia, he was like throwing combinations early. He was looking like he was very comfortable there in the ring. Showed a little bit of elements of defense that we hadn't really seen from Jaime Munguia for the majority of his career. So I thought it was like highly likely his best performance that he's had in his professional career. Outside of when he won the world title at 154 pounds against Saddam Ali. But I thought that was good for him on that part.
Yeah, you can definitely see that he's learning, and I am so glad that he's able to be around Canelo, because I don't know this for sure, but I do get the feeling that Canelo isn't one of them stingy like fighters who only show you just so much. Like Canelo done already beat him. You know your place in the pecking order. Now you little brother. Now Canelo can like pour into you and essentially help you. And so with that being said, you can see a stark difference. And some of it definitely is style, but you can see a stark difference in his defense. Like you can see how he sort of was doing the same things. You can tell him and Canelo was going through the motions of doing a little step and turn away type thing on certain punches when the guy gets too deep in the pocket.
Yeah,
And like somebody said Munguia showed levels. And so to me, I was kind of proud of Munguia because like one thing people say is like it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, but we see Munguia improving in front of us. He's a much better fighter than he was. He's not as one dimensional. Like you can tell that he's learning, and he's going to be able to incorporate things that elongate his career
yeah,
versus the original style that he had. You could put him in a firm box and be like, you're this way. And like him getting knocked out, and then he fought a different way with Saddam Ali the second time, beat him up, bludgeoned him. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm proud of him. I'm proud. Yeah. So I was happy to see that. And that's the same thing with Fundora. It's good to see Fundora, using his reach,
yeah.
walking people into shots. Like he's learning. It's good to see that.
Mhm.
Now, the one thing I will say, I'm sorry, I'm about to go back to the Benavidez fight.
All right.
They allowed Zurdo Ramirez to go out on his shield. Yes, he was overmatched, but they allowed him to go out on his shield. My only regret in the Fundora Thurman fight, I'm sorry, I'm going back to it, is that we got deprived of our Coliseum style, gladiator
Yeah, yeah,
ending.
yeah.
We got deprived of our glorious ending, or whatever they say in Spartacus.
Mm-hmm.
Keith Thurman, like, yes, he was getting beat up, but the fight wasn't over inside of Keith Thurman. And that last stanza, none of them punches landed on him. I wish that we were able to get a definitive win like Benavidez showed us. Let's say if they stopped the Benavidez fight, I don't know. I mean, that was a different fight because he was beating him up the whole time. Like Benavidez landing shots, boy. He was landing
Yeah,
shots.
yeah, he did.
Yeah. So it's a different fight, but you get the theme of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
We should have been the same way that he was allowed, and unfortunately, this is a brutal sport. He got beat up. The same way that he was allowed to sort of, yeah, he got beat up, but you still gave him an opportunity to try if something was in there.
yeah,
We should have gave Keith Thurman that same thing, man.
yeah. I mean,
The same consideration.
the funny thing about it is that was the same referee.
Was it?
It was the same
Was
referee.
it?
It would be the same referee, man. It was the
And he didn't stop this fight.
it was the same referee.
What?
Yep, Thomas Taylor, man.
Oh my gosh! Why? I wasn't paying attention. I was so busy trying to judge a fight and stuff. That is so crazy, man.
Yeah, man. Hey, remember though, we criticized that whole card though, because you had Thomas Taylor calling fights early, Alan Huggins calling fights early on that card. But this one right here, man, we had this joint, with this main event, and a couple of other joints that did happen. Like the other joint where we had a stoppage win there in the last round with Tito Sanchez win over Jorge Chavez, you know, and the referee for that was Alan Huggins, so he didn't even call that fight early. He let that joint go for 10 rounds. But I mean, but at least with that one, that was a close fight. It wasn't like when Yoeli Hernandez was beating up a dude, and it was like absolutely no shot. But it wasn't like that guy was like seriously hurt. It was just he didn't have much of a chance against Yoeli Hernandez. But Alan Huggins called that fight early, but he let that joint get through on this fight card here on May 2nd. But yeah, the main event for both of those joints, March 30th with Sebastian Fedora and Keith Thurman, and here on May 2nd with David Benavidez and Zurdo Ramirez. It was the same referee, Thomas Taylor.
But you know what?
Yeah, go ahead.
Our voice is strong because we have enough ears to where if we point something out, and it's not like something that is bogus, it's something that's a legitimate sort of thing. Could it have made him be more self-conscious in that, like, maybe I shouldn't stop the fights as early? Could that have been something? Because people do listen to
Yeah,
these spaces.
yeah, they do. They do.
Because I mean, this is data. This is data. Like, people respond, people tell us what they think. Like, this is a boxing you know people who pay for the sport, who are interested in the sport. You get like a high dosage of what people are thinking
Mhm.
through these sort of spaces. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like they invest in the sport, they invest their time, their money, and everything, resources into the sport. So they, have their, they provide assessments there because they see what's been going on inside the ring, maybe outside the ring, all of that type of stuff. But like you said, man, it's kind of like a trend here in a sense. But I think with Edward Thomas Taylor, or maybe a number of referees, is that you would at least want something like, as you requested for March 30th, a definitive ending, because remember that's a world title fight. You know what I mean? You would want fighters that either are going up there as a challenger or might have had a status beforehand, before getting the opportunity for a world championship, to be able to go out on their shield in a sense. That's how you would have these definitive endings like you had last night, or like you had in the undisputed welterweight championship fight in 2023 with Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford, or something like maybe the second bout between Tyson Fury, or the third fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. We had something that was well, I would say the third fight, not the second fight, because I mean it ended up being a stoppage, but you've seen that there wasn't much at the time that Wilder could do in that second fight. But at least in the third fight, you saw what was happening there because Wilder was able to score those two knockdowns that he did. So even though he was getting knocked down and getting up, he was able to knock Fury down. And up until like the 10th round, he was still trying. So you would at least want something like that from a fight of that magnitude, because you don't want it to be a stoppage where it's like we didn't get a definitive ending, from either side. You know what I'm saying? That's how like classic fights end up being classic fights, because
Yes.
we don't have like referees stepping in at a time in a high profile bout. Like one of the things there was Corrales Castillo. That one, could have been where the referee could have made the decision to stop the fight, but he didn't. And Corrales was able to get back in that joint. You know what I mean? So
Another another one, Tim Bradley and Ruslan Provodnikov.
Podnikov, yeah, yeah.
Somebody was well within their right to be like, Tim, you getting touched up.
Hmm.
But he was trying. Yes, he got bludgeoned. Yes, both of them was peeing blood. Yes, they both stepped away from the sport to heal up after that fight, and they were both not the same after leaving that fight. At the same time, had we stopped it, it wouldn't have been that fight. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, but that is the sport. That is what people sign up for. Yes, we want to protect people, and we are mindful, and we are going in the right direction to be mindful. At the same time, the sport is about.
yeah. Who's the
Help me finish
who's
it.
the man in the sense? It's a gladiator.
Who's the man? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Who can get the job done?
Who's the man or woman or whatever it is? We got women's boxing, but in a sense of these classic matchups that a lot of people refer to or something like that, and these definitive endings, particularly if it goes like a certain amount of rounds, like people, I don't know, like I feel like the referee isn't necessarily aware of how much of a factor they are in these bouts being classics because their decisions, yeah, they could decide the fate of a fighter, and yeah, they would decide the fate of a fighter's future. But again, like you wouldn't have like these fights that could be talked about that were like could be mentioned in the Hall of Fame or mentioned as fight of the year or things like that if you don't have like a definitive ending or whatever it is. So yeah, it's kind of like a slippery slope in a sense for referees because sometimes they go through seminars and that type of thing in order to properly assess what's going on in the ring and when to see if you could step in and call it, but at the same token, you don't necessarily get these classics if that isn't the case. Now, see here if I was able to add in another guest in the building. Has been part of the movement here for the Boxing Source for a long time. As I mentioned before, this is the 11th season of the Boxing Source. Pretty much the Boxing Source podcast started off as the Boxing Source radio show, but now the Boxing Source podcast. And one of the original members here of this show here from a good little minute has been the resident chef of the Boxing Source here, Brother Terrell in the building. What's going on?
What's up, Buster? How's everything?
All good, fam. All good. Had an action-packed weekend, man. Hey, what you think about Benavidez versus Zurdo that happened?
Honestly, so let me ask you a question. I think the last time we were on, I'd asked you where did you place Benavidez in on the box source pound for pound list. What was that last week? I think number.
Yeah, so yeah, shout out to those that like brought that up here. Benavidez climbing up the pound for pound list, right? So, I kind of like had him, out there around like, number 5 or number 6 or something like that. You feel me? Um, because I thought that, what he had been doing at super middleweight and then, having the titles there at, heavyweight or whatever it is. Actually, I'll take that back because I hadn't really posted one up since February like that. I had him around like number 4. Okay. So after this performance here, he's got to be around like number 3. He's got to be around number 3. Now, some would say that he could be at number 2, mainly because of who would be around there in the top 2. You have Alexander Usyk and you have Naoya Inoue. Now, the situation is with Alexander Usyk, we hadn't had the fight since Daniel Dubois over in London, right? And then he's fighting on May 23rd, but it's going to be against Rico Verhoeven, who is a kickboxer. So they're saying, like, hey, he's not fighting anybody that's like within the top, I don't know, 80 or 100 or whatever it is in the heavyweight division. So if he's going through with that fight, can you keep him at that spot in the pound for pound rankings? Nah, not really. So with that being said, hey, you could make a case that David Benavidez could potentially be number 2 pound for pound.
Let me give you a little bit of controversy here, right?
All right.
So Benavidez, we know he campaigned at 168 for quite some time. We know he never did get the fight that he wanted, that we all wanted. And what's funny, this fight just solidified the fight. The reason why Canelo didn't want to fight. He didn't want to be on the receiving end of what we just saw last night, because that definitely would be the case, right? So once again, Benavidez, long time at 168, jumped up to 175. We know that, right? And once again, now jumped up to cruiserweight. 25 pound weight difference, right?
Yep.
All right. Here's the controversy. Crawford moved up from 147 to 154 to 168. Right? And he, of course, we know he's pretty much a lifetime cruiserweight. I'm sorry, welterweight, right? So what's more impressive? Crawford going from 154 to 168 to fight Canelo and win that, or Benavidez going to cruiserweight and win in the way he won.
Ooh.
Once again, you got both guys moving up in weight.
Can you ask the question again? I'm sorry, Terrell. I was looking away and I wasn't listening completely. Can you ask the question again? I'm sorry.
So what's most more impressive? Crawford going to 168 to beat Canelo in the fashion that he did. He pretty much dominated him. I mean, it's a competitive fight. We know that, right? And here we got Benavidez going up to cruiserweight. Once again, moved up way outside his natural weight in a sense, and getting the win in the way that he did. What's more impressive?
I got an answer, JR.
All right, what's your answer, academic?
Y'all not gonna like the answer, but I'm gonna answer. I think they're both equal. And I'm gonna tell you why. The circumstances around Terrence Crawford going up 2 weight divisions. Yes, he went up 2 weight divisions. Yes, he's the smaller man. However, he fought an older Canelo Alvarez, who is a legend, by the way, who's a Hall of Famer already. So he fought a very reputable guy who just happens to be on the tail end of his career. So you gotta say that, but it was a masterful performance. With Benavidez, he went up a couple weight divisions to fight a guy who wasn't no killer. He had 2 belts, but he wasn't no killer. I'm borrowing the words from JR. So you gotta give it a tie, because one guy is older, but he has earned all the stripes he done got. And the other guy, yes, he's a title holder, but he's just that, a title holder. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm just calling it like it is. And Benavidez, in all metrics, was the favorite. So I call it a tie for those reasons.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be a prisoner of the moment either, because both of these are recent fights.
Yeah. And academic, pretty much like laid out the situation. The thing there with Terrence Crawford is that we had the fight at 147 in 2023, or last fight at 147 in 2023. He goes up to 154 and has one fight at 154 pounds, and then he goes up to 168 in 2025 to face Santos Alvarez Barragan. But on the flip side, with Alvarez there, or Canelo, of course, he has his performances that he has, in the previous fights. And the one thing that kind of stood out to me was his fight against William Skull, right? In that you didn't necessarily see the Canelo that I guess people would expect against a fighter of Canelo. Against William Skull's caliber. Okay, he was highly favored, significantly favored against William Skull. But that fight, the way that the fight looked, it was really terrible or whatever it is.
Flat,
right? Or in the previous fight that he had against Edgar Berlanga, I'm like, come on, man. I'm just being real with y'all. Some people would kind of like say I'm a hater, but this is like, what we assess here from looking at the fighter and what he's been able to do in his professional career. At the end of the day, it's Edgar Berlanga, right? And so you have him fight Edgar Berlanga. He has a knockdown against Edgar Berlanga. And then after that, it's pretty much almost like a coast throughout the rest of the fight. So I'll tell you, like, here's 4 fights that Canelo had before Terrence Crawford: Jamel Charlo, Jaime Munguia, Edgar Berlanga, William Skull. 3 of those 4 fights pretty much went the same way, the exact same way. A knockdown was scored in the first half of the fight, and then the rest of the fight was basically, well, okay, we're going through these things round by round by round. He's not like stepping it up. He's not getting much engagement from a number of the opponents, but he's not stepping it up to the point where, as we've seen with David Benavidez, we have a definitive ending to it. So when he goes up against Terrence Crawford, it's like, you know what? From what I'm seeing from Canelo Alvarez, I think Terrence Crawford has a shot to beat Canelo Alvarez. And before the fight, I was picking Crawford to beat Canelo. So when that actually happened, it was like, yeah, we see that. And you had a key point in the fight where it looked like Canelo was trying to step it up a notch. But when Crawford bashed him, it was like, nah, he almost like made that as boxing academic says at times, he made that business decision not to really take it there, because if he would have taken it there, he probably could have gotten hurt. You know what I mean? So you have that on one side. The other side here with with Benavidez, right? He goes up from 175 to 200. And yeah, you do have Zurdo Ramirez as your unified champion, but as we were talking about before, he's a unified champion that was getting a win, but it'd be a decision win. And it wasn't like where he would knock down his fight, his opponents, seriously hurt his opponents or whatever it is. It's like academic was mentioned. It almost looked like he was a belt holder. But yeah, he was still like, top 1 or 2 in the cruiserweight division, but it's not like he's definitively beating these guys. So as far as like being the more impressive, yeah, I would say it's a toss up. Here at this point, you don't necessarily want to be like a prisoner of the moment. And then when it comes to David Benavidez, it was a great performance by him, but to a certain extent, you got to be like, okay, yeah, he had a great performance, but he still was favored. You know what I mean? So that's what I got, bro.
And I want to reiterate, just because we are pointing out something about these fighters, it doesn't take away their greatness. I'm just repeating what you're saying, JR. We're able to separate a fighter's greatness with the actual circumstances around the fight. That's just us being critical, of A, the circumstances, B, the fighter. 2 different things. It doesn't take away any of those fighters' greatness, but they both was Crawford favored in the fight?
He might have been I don't know if he was a slight favorite or not.
But betting lines, he probably wasn't. Was he favored in betting lines?
Not opening, he probably wasn't, but I would say that he might have been either like a slight favorite or something like that. No, it was Canelo was a favorite. But he was like around minus 170, and Terrence Crawford was like plus 135. So it was pretty close odds, but it was still like where Canelo was like 2-1 favorite at one point, and then once it got closer to the fight, more people started to put money towards Terrence Crawford.
And that actually, when you took us back to 2023 and going forward with Crawford, he jumped up to 154. When that talk first came out from his camp, they thought that he wanted to fight Canelo. You guys there?
Yeah, we here.
All right, cool. Yeah, when the talk first came out that he wanted to fight Canelo, we know boxing hardcore people, boxing Twitter, everyone like, what? That was pretty much the across the board reaction when Crawford said he wanted to go out and fight Canelo. And when we look at what Benavidez said, he wanted to jump up to one cruiserweight, fight Zurdo, it was surprising, but not on the level of when Crawford made his announcement like that, right? Because we just hadn't seen that before. Someone coming from a low weight class like that, outside of Pacquiao, that's a decade ago. We know that, but in this modern era right here, we hadn't seen that before. With someone coming up like that, seemingly biting up more than they can chew, right? So definitely the reaction when Crawford made his announcement was more like, "What? There's no way in hell you're gonna be able to beat the guy." First, like someone Benavidez made that, I'm like, "Oh, okay, we'll see." But so I don't know. But once I'm not trying to take away anything from Crawford, but that performance it will stand the test of time and has forever cemented him with his place in history and his place in this decade for the top pound for pound boxers, right? But it was just an interesting point of view to let's look at both sides of that, see what you guys had to say.
Yeah.
But I mean, but
What's
just
your
even just, I'm going to lean towards Crawford still. I respect it. And one thing with Benavidez that I give him so much credit for, what do we say in championship fights? The higher that you go up, your knockouts don't happen as much.
Yeah.
Not this guy.
No,
Not this
not
guy.
with him. Not with
And
him.
and and I had my concerns for Benavidez going to the fight, as Zurdo had been a cruiserweight for quite some time, longer than him more established at the weight class, was physically the bigger man. On top of that, was we haven't really seen against in Benavidez having to look up things like that. So I had my concerns about that. But once again, we talked about last week. Benavidez had sparred against Zurdo before, so there's that familiarity right there with the guy. So that
Yeah.
takes away that edge, that fear per se,
Yeah.
like that.
Yep.
But man, I mean, and one more thing too with the face off too. Once again, the size advantage, and I was very concerned for how Benavidez will actually look at the weight. He basically looked the same guy, same body style. I mean, it was funny. It looks like the guy has no muscle,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But as we know, boxing is not necessarily a muscle bound sport. When you take care of that, you just need to be in shape, and skills pay the bills. We know that,
Yep.
and surely we saw that. And with that last flurry, some people say it's like an eight punch combination. I think kind of 12 to 14 punches. There's a 12, at least 12 to 2 punches.
Man.
That flurry was amazing, but that's what we've seen from Benavidez before, time and time again, with so many different points. And now he got Zurdo on his highlight reel, so that was amazing. But just the way he took him out, 6 round KO, TKO, whatever it was, right there. I mean, that's just to me definitely top 3 pound for pound, definitely easily. After that, easily.
Yeah. And real quick, shout out to my guy there, Clarence McClay of No Duck Zone podcast there. Salute to you. It says, yeah, smash that like button there. Big ups for everyone that's, watching here live, and whether it's on YouTube or Rumble, and of course, those listening to the replay here for the Boxing Source podcast. But like you were mentioning there, Brother Terrell, when it comes to David Benavidez, having this performance, it's like, man, you see that, you got to like put him they're within the top 3 of the pound for pound, because from what I've seen from other media outlets or publications or something like that, they had put a fighter that scored a win on January 31st within their top 3 of the pound for pound list, and I was like, yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, I kind of get it, but at the end of that fight, I said, listen. Great performance from Shakur Nafisa Stevenson. But in order for him to be that guy that like fans would like say, yo, you gotta watch for this dude. I wanted to see a definitive finish because there was absolutely nothing Teofimo Lopez could do against Shakur Stevenson on that night. Absolutely nothing. But it's just like I be saying, it's about going to that second level and proving that they shouldn't even be in the ring with you. Sweep them up out the ring, all that type of stuff. Like I'm gonna take them out, whether I'm gonna knock them down, knock them out, or I'm gonna have it to the point where that corner over there is gonna say, "Man, we ain't gonna bring you out for the next round." We could have had something like in reference to Shakur Stevenson and Teofimo Lopez. I don't know. Maybe it could have been like, when Floyd Mayweather, had that fight against Arturo Gotti. I don't know. But you would want to see something like that. But we didn't necessarily get that from Shakur Stevenson, even though he was favored in that bout against Teofimo Lopez. When I mentioned earlier, David Benavidez was favored against Zurdo Ramirez, but he made sure that, hey, you ain't supposed to belong in the ring with me. I'm taking you out. Get the broom, sweep him up, get him out the ring. I'm going to dust this dude. And that's exactly what he did, So props for David Benavidez for getting that win. Getting those unified titles at cruiserweight. Before you join on here, Brother Terrell, we had some suggestions as a potential fight for David Benavidez here next down the line. We might see if we can get lined up for a fight in September. Right? Some people have mentioned Dimitri Bivol at 175. I'm like, yeah, that could be okay, but at the end of the day, it's still Dimitri Bivol. He's still going to be fighting, on May 30th, there against Michael Leifert, which everybody knew that he was going to be fighting Michael Leifert since he had his injury that he sustained last year. So it's like, okay, ho hum, what to do, whoop-de-doo, Michael Leifert. But after that, is he going to be facing someone like David Benavidez next? Some people doubt that that's going to happen. So a suggestion came up for David Benavidez, but it's in the heavyweight division. Boxing Academic had immediately dismissed this as a potential matchup. But what about David Benavidez in the heavyweight division against Deontay Wilder? What do you think about that, Chef?
That's just not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I mean, you got two people that are on different spectrums of their career, right? I mean, to be honest, Wilder is holding on to a hope and a dream at this point, and he is not going to go into the ring and get embarrassed by Benavidez with superior hand speed, superior boxing ability, even the fact that Benavidez has never fought a heavyweight before. No. It's he. I'm not going to get no. He would get his ass lit up in there.
And I'm not saying as much as Terrell is saying, but I'm saying what like I hear people saying this, but what is actually in this for Deontay Wilder? Like really,
Exactly.
what's in it?
Exactly.
At this point in his career, being a five, how many years he 10 defense champion. He wants to get more belts, which again, as Terrell said, might be wishful thinking at this point in his career. But yeah, I hear people being excited about it, but what's in it for Deontay Wilder, who's had a full career? You just want to throw him away just because it sounds nice?
And then, on top of that, how much money is in that fight anyways? Who pays for that fight?
You're going to have to give him a lot of money.
Yeah. Outside of Turkey, there's no one that's going to pay. Let's say the fight does get made, right? And Turkey makes it. You're looking at probably like a 10 million per fighter. I'm just guessing on that one. Yeah. Outside of Turkey making that fight, 3-4 million per fighter at the most. And at this point now, with Wilder, boxing is a business. He's now trying to make the most money as he can. Because that door is right there to lead the sport. So you're going to take the least amount of risk, and you want to make the most amount of money that you can, right? So Benavidez that doesn't make sense, not at all.
Word.
from a marketing perspective, from a business perspective, and just career wise, it doesn't make sense. Benavidez has nothing to offer Wilder. He doesn't.
Mm. So you're basically like Tracy Morgan when he was in the car. No, no, hell no, 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 no. You just say there should be absolutely no reason that this fight should even be, in the stratosphere of happening. I kind of like get it, like you said with your point. Deontay Wilder has had his fights there, being a long time heavyweight champion there with the WBC, having his fights there with Tyson Fury, and with his last few fights that he's had, there, whether it's against Joseph Parker, Zalei Zhang, or recently here with Derek Chisora. Like you kind of like see from what he's done here recently that it wouldn't be necessarily a good idea to have him going up against David Benavidez at this point. And it's almost like, they would kind of, as you say, like serve him up. Like, what's the point of having him being served up, to a David Benavidez or something like that? Or at least people would kind of think that way if they would make that matchup.
When he could fight Joshua or Usyk.
You could fight Joshua or Usyk or or Fury or even maybe another fight with Parker or even the loser of next weekend's fight between Fabio Wardley and Daniel Dubois. Like you could still even have them have that type of a fight. So there's a number of fighters that are still out there within the heavyweight division that Deontay Wilder could fight that would make a lot more sense than putting them in the ring against a David Benavidez. You know what I mean? So, I don't necessarily see why, that could be a possibility.
And so to that point, I also have the same sentiment with Canelo Alvarez. With what Canelo has done this far in his career, why would he take this fight? Like, would it be nice? Sure. But again, are we going to serve Canelo up for Benavidez? I get it. Benavidez wants his star to like shine and go as high and as bright as it can, but it just don't make sense. It doesn't make sense for the other person.
Mm.
And yeah, somebody might try to give Canelo enough money, but does he need the money for this fight? I don't think so.
That's what Canelo would say. All money ain't good money.
All money ain't good money.
All money ain't good money. It's interesting. You do have Canelo that's been in the in the era of, yes, he's had that bout against Floyd Mayweather. That was September of 2013. And even at that point, even though Canelo had like an early start in his professional career and had been very busy in Mexico, by the time he fought Floyd Mayweather during that matchup, they both had around the same amount of fights, like 42 or 43 fights. So now you go from that and then fast forward to now. Here we are. It's another 12, 13 years later, and he's, been part of that era in, 154, 160 with the Miguel Cottos, the Gennady Golovkins, Daniel Jacobs, or, whatever. And, had his challenges against the guys that had been around the 175s and Sergey Kovalev or, Dmitry Bivol. So at this point, he's already, been there past his peak, past his prime. His era is gone. But yes, he's still, continuing his career right now. He does have, plan to face Christian and Billy in September over in Saudi Arabia. But it's like, okay, why would you have him fight David Benavidez at this particular point when David Benavidez is on his way, like all the way up, and to a certain extent, as we talk about David Benavidez and his, size, I mean, how is it any different than when, Canelo fought Dmitry Bivol? Like, he didn't really have any type of answer for Dmitry Bivol. It was just like Bivol just outpointed him in every sense of the, every sense of word. Now add to that speed and power with David Benavidez going up against Canelo. Yeah, that ain't a good look.
But like I said, just to answer the question, who should Benavidez fight next? Whoever, and simple answers, whoever he wants, right? Outside Canelo, that's not going to happen. I mean, honestly, you said that Bivol fights at the end of this month. So in theory, both guys have enough rest recovery time to fight against it in September. But my question is, does Bivol want that? And I'm not saying that Bivol is scared of Benavidez. I'm not saying that. But in terms of matchmaking, and matchmaking is a big understated part of boxing that we really don't talk about a lot on the show. So in terms of matchmaking, is that the right move? Of course, I would love to see Benavidez Beterbiev. I would love to see that. But being the fact that Beterbiev does not have a belt, that takes away some of the luster from that fight. That would be, I think, it'd be a slugfest that we all love to see. So who's he fight next? If like we already talked about in the group, it won't be Jai Pataya, won't be him. We would love to. And what's funny, he just recently signed with him. We don't know why, but he did. I don't know how they lured him away. But imagine if he still had the IBF belt and he was available, then we could, in theory, see that fight next. Because Jai Pataya just fought here recently.
Yeah.
But now it's so funny when you look at just look back at boxing. So many top fights that almost always elude us that we want to happen. They just don't happen for some reason or another. Typically 2003s like that. We always see, and it's crazy because I don't know. I don't know who will win that, Benavidez or Appetite. I don't know. But that's a classic 50-50 fight. Once again, that's going to elude us. Shame.
Well, it may elude us. I know that Benavidez did speak after his win over Zurdo Ramirez that he did openly ask the fans if they would want to see him fighting Canelo Alvarez since Canelo was there in attendance at T-Mobile Arena. But he also said that Dimitri Bivol is priority number one. So he's going to be paying extra attention to Bivol in his bout against Michael Eifert. And, seeing if they could make that fight ASAP. Because remember, for this fight here against Zurdo Ramirez, hey, Benavidez ain't really had to work down to get to 175 or nothing like that. He just could have said, like, hey, you know what, man, I ain't even got to, worry about making weight. I'll probably walk around at this weight, you know what I'm saying? So all I got to do is just, do what needs to be done in the gym to, just properly work on my sharpness. I don't have to, worry about running all that much. Although he was, doing that. You kind of like seen that in the I forgot what the title of the thing was for when they were, promoting this. But you can see he was still, doing those exercises, but it wasn't to the point where he's like, hey, saying, hey, I got to cut this weight down so I can make 200. But he's not, he wasn't actively competing at 200 at the time. He was competing at 175. So now he's going up to 200 and being like, oh man, I got all of this, weight to kind of like work around. Oh man, this gonna be, it's gonna be like great. I could work, do my thing in Miami. I could close out the, the training camp in Vegas. I'll be good once I step on the scale. You know what I mean? So he could probably do that same thing if he potentially has his bout against Jai Opetaia, which would be at least for the Ring Magazine Championship at cruiserweight. It's just a whole thing with Zuffa, but I don't know. Maybe they could make history because at the end of the day, it's about money, it's about business, and you see what the attention how much attention was given to David Benavidez here for this weekend. And with Jai Opetaia on the flip side, like I said, being from Australia or whatever it is, or, doing this thing as a cruiserweight in Australia, it's not like, they really have him be at the level of, say, for example, a Tim Tszyu, right? So that's why he ended up signing with Zuffa Boxing. Because it's like, yeah, you could get this exposure in a sense on Paramount Plus or in the American market, but fighting the Brandon Glantons or maybe like somebody else there within the cruiserweight division that might not get enough interest. You will want to see like what he could do against David Benavidez. So I have to see. David Benavidez right now holds the keys there within the 175 and the cruiserweight divisions. So it's just gonna have to be okay. Who is gonna be willing to step up and say, you know what? I'll be able to go ahead and face David Benavidez. Because as dangerous as Benavidez is, if they say that a lot of fans and folks are, want to see David Benavidez, it really doesn't matter who the opponent is. If the money's there, they're gonna step in and fight him. You know what I mean? So
One
we'll
thing
see how
too
that goes.
with Zuffa, right? They're
Mhm.
basically trying to create their own boxing bubble, right? And with the Zuffa belt, and I might have to relinquish my Zuffa boxing title.
You're vacating the Zuffa boxing title, huh? You're vacating it.
Yeah,
Um,
they're basically making their own bubble and make their own set of rules with their own fighters like that. And I tell you what, if they were to make Benavidez an Alpataya, that's going to set a precedence for them. For other fights that may be on their umbrella. Well, how about me getting a fight with somebody else outside of Zuffa? And I just don't think they're going to do that. It wouldn't be a good look for them for going outside their bubble. But at the same time, they're going to get criticism for if the Benavidez Alpataya doesn't fight get made. They're still going to get criticism from boxing, but hardcore boxing people, you know. So it's a slippery slope with them with this Zuffa boxing in their own boxing bubble in that
yeah,
regard.
it was like I was mentioning earlier there with Jao Bataya. The way that his situation was handled before his bout against Brandon Glanton was just, not a good look. All they had to do was, openly communicate with the IBF. At least for me, I felt like they needed to openly communicate with the IBF and just say, hey, we're going to have this fight. It's going to be, on this, platform. Just tell us, what needs to be done in order for us to keep the IBF title. Whether it's, just saying, hey, we're not going to put the IBF title on the line, but we'll still, pay a fee because we have that moniker as the IBF champion that gives us, a level of notoriety. But they didn't necessarily work that out. So that's how, the IBF made the decision to eventually strip him. Now, what's crazy is they still have him like ranked, there in the IBF, and Jai Opatai is like rated within the sanctioning bodies there. So I think if you're going to have this bout happen, will it have like Zuffa behind it? I kind of like said, not necessarily. It'll be more of like TKO and Turkey Al Sheik or something like that, to where a Turkey will say, hey, you know what? Let's see if we can put this amount of money towards about between David Benavidez and John Obataya. Now, what would kind of like have me really interested is if they're going to do that, would they do that for September? Wait, last I checked, they just announced this whole thing with Canelo Alvarez facing Christian and Billy over in Saudi Arabia as supposed to be in September. So I don't know if Turkey Al Sheikh would kind of put, his money towards like two events that could be around the same day. Who knows? They did do something to that kind of like that extent with last year, but it was like in different days. With the fights in New York City, there in Saudi Arabia, and then in Las Vegas on that Sunday. But outside of that, I don't know if they'll really make a move to make Jai Overtire versus David Benavidez next. At least I doubt it. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
even on that, which speak on that possibility, going back to when Canelo Crawford wanted to fight Canelo, right?
yeah,
And there's a big reluctance from Canelo, like nah, he's too small, nah, all other stuff like that, right?
hmm
And I think that once Turkey got behind it and say the money's gonna be there for you, right? Uh, because remember for a while Turkey courted Canelo for quite some time, and Canelo spurned him over and over again.
yeah,
I got money. I don't need your money. Been boom, fighting on board. So now, in a sense, Turkey. I won't say made Canelo fight Crawford, but he's a driving force in that fight with the money. We know that.
yeah.
Uh, and now with Canelo, what's the event called in September? The Canelo return. What's it called?
I don't know what the title of it is, but they said it was going to be Mexico. Well, kind of like Mexico versus the world in a
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
So they got it where he's facing Christian and Billy, and then they're gonna eventually make announcements of like what other fighters are gonna be involved in that card.
Yeah, so with that said, if I'm Canelo, if someone's talking about if Turkey's even entertaining the possibility of doing the Benavidez job opportunity fight on the same day, like I'm Canelo, like, dude,
Yeah, ain't
I
going.
finally got you over here. Give me my light, and don't fuck with my date.
Yeah,
Pretty much,
yeah,
you're doing too much.
yeah.
You finally got me. Now take care, Mr. Fighter. Give me all exposure. That's what I need. So I don't think that would happen.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know how they're gonna handle that situation there in the fall. And as long as they have that date there for Canelo Alvarez versus Christian and Billy, and we get the details from it, and they're just gonna build towards that fight. But with David Benavidez, I think that he should continue to forge his path there as a fighter because at 168 looked like he was waiting for Canelo Alvarez, didn't get it. At 175, he was waiting on that, opportunity there with Dimitri Bivol. He didn't get it. So, going up to, 200 there in the cruiserweight division, we just kind of like forging this path there on that sense. And we're going to see if he, could get a bout against Jai Opataya or maybe another, defense of those cruiserweight belts or seeing if there's going to be something out there at 175. But, the thing about it is that if these guys are reluctant to step in the ring to face David Benavidez, then Benavidez is going to have to forge his own path, once again, But I think if they feel like, hey, if we get the numbers for this particular pay-per-view or whatever it is, and they say it's like fairly successful, and that the numbers for the box office are pretty good for them, then the money might be there. It'll be too much for these fighters to pass up. So, at the end of the day, it's still business. So, if the business and the money is there, these fighters are going to go ahead and take it, regardless of what the result could be if those fights take place. Now, I wanted to, move forward into, another big matchup that happened on May 2nd. It was, early in the morning there, if you were here in the States. But it was the super fight of sorts there in Japan. The undisputed titles there at super bantamweight. Naoya Inoue, they're undefeated, going up against Junto Nakatani, undefeated. Okay, they look like they pretty much like had the same amount of fights as a professional, whatever it was, right? 32-0, both of them going in there 32-0. For me, I felt like it was a fight of two halves, but Nakatani, I felt like gave up a number of rounds early. What I mean by that was he kind of like was fighting off of his back foot. He, wanted to see if he could, catch Naoya Inoue with a counter left hand, and see if he could bait him into a trap. But you could see that Naoya Inoue too experienced to kind of like fall for that, and kind of like was very calculated in how he was attacking a Junto Nakatani there in the first half of the fight. And so I feel like that was where you see Naoya Inoue get a majority of those rounds. For Nakatani, I felt like he should have been more aggressive, early in that bout. Because once you've seen that happen there with around like that ninth round or something like that, you've seen that Inoue had a couple of issues there in a sense, man. So I thought, hey, if you were there, you're the taller fighter, as in a sense. If you got like a little thing where you could, be the younger fighter, taller fighter, and have some reach or whatever it is, try to see if you can take advantage of that. And yes, we've seen Naoya Inoue have some lapses on defense in his previous fights. So why not try to see if you could, go for it a little bit more or probably a little bit earlier? But we didn't necessarily see that. There was like a level of tension of sorts after like, round 10, but like in 11 and 12, you seen like in a way kind of like get the better of Nakatani in those. And that's why he ended up winning by unanimous decision there to keep those 102-pound titles there, and he stays undefeated. Shout out to Zoe in the building, man. It's been a good little minute, man. Hear from Zoe here, man. Checking in on the Boxing Source podcast. But yeah, you got Naoya Inoue there. Like I said, still undefeated, now 33-0, handing Junto Nakatani his first loss. And we talked about this whole thing with David Benavidez and his standing in the pound for pound list. You got Naoya Inoue that has been mentioned by many as around like top 2 on the pound for pound list. Now with this performance against Junto Nakatani, who has been mentioned in or within the top 10 pound for pound, maybe this could have Naoya Inoue be at number 1. I had like Nakatani around like number 9 or number 8 in the pound for pound list before I could finally like update this thing. But with Naoya Inoue's performance, was pretty solid in a sense, but he was able to get the win here by unanimous decision. Like, is there like any feedback on what y'all seen or may have seen there from Naoya Inoue against Nakatani?
Well, for me, when the fight first started, like I just said in our chat group, for me, and looking at Inoue, man, you just saw the fire in his eyes, man. This dude's just ready for the moment and ready for the opponent. You see, the guy definitely did his work. And for me, the most telling part of the fight that Nakatani fought is a southpaw. And when we had that classic southpaw orthodox fighter, who gets their outside foot who gets that lead foot to the outside, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter for Inoue. It didn't matter at all. He was
Yeah.
able to get off inside, outside. It didn't matter for him. So he's just a somewhat cautiously aggressive in the first few rounds. Of course, that's how a fight on that level is going to play out. We know that. But even as the fight go on, it was Inoue clearly that was more
Mhm.
aggressive. And he got and I was concerned about with Nakatani because like I said, we seen Inoue get dropped before in his previous fights like that. So I was waiting to see if that would happen. That didn't happen, of course. But Inoue was just a more controlled aggression. That's what I saw, and that's certainly what made the difference. And like I said, if Nakatani could have gone to work even earlier, that would have made a difference in the fight. So, I mean, it is what it is. It was a good high level fight. Good for Japan. It was a good fight. Good fight.
Yep, pretty good fight there. To a certain level. I feel like in the last couple of rounds there for Nagatani, I would have thought that he would have tried to take more risks. Yeah, I did see like after the fight there was like some suggestions that they could see if they could have a rematch. Zoe out here in the live chat says that there's no need for a rematch there, and that he said that Nagatani had to sell out to make it competitive, but if he does it earlier, he gets stopped. Hey, sometimes you might have to take those risks, man. I know that Inoue's, precision and it could be like his speed would have, been a difference there in a sense. But hey, when it's the undisputed titles on the line, when you're going up against a top 2 pound for pound fighter, and you want to make a statement there as the guy, because y'all have pretty much have been, like I said, same amount of fights. In a way, he did start, a little bit earlier in his career than you did, but at least at that point, you kind of like seen it was a different level of class in the sense. Academic, what you got?
Yeah, so I went back to my comments that I had in the group because this was my immediate feedback. So I went back to look at my comments to remember what I said. So this was earlier in the fight. I asked y'all a question. Is Nakatani trying to win or is he trying to make it to the end of the fight?
End of the
You JR didn't necessarily agree with me, I don't think. But and so I also said I guess that isn't a bad thing since most people don't see the end of Inoue fights. And so then a couple rounds later, I said, I mean, the steam has left Inoue a bit, so maybe it was a good strategy. And then he arguably won round 6, and then he won a few more. He stringed together a few rounds where he won, and you could tell Inoue was tired, and he was essentially making Inoue work toward the mid of the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, he might have buzzed Inoue for a sec. And also was like, Inoue needs that second win. Oh, the headbutt. So Nakatani was coming on strong.
Yeah.
He was coming on real strong. Inoue was tired. He didn't get his second win. And then the headbutt came out. We're going to say it was out of nowhere. But, then the headbutt stopped his momentum. And so essentially, for me, the headbutt was the biggest change of pace in the fight because he had all the momentum at that point. Inoue was tired. He was pushing Inoue. I'm not saying nothing crazy would have happened, but I'm just saying the headbutt definitely stopped his momentum and it allowed Inoue to get back control of the fight. One thing that I did notice, I said, in a way, shelling up with the high guard could be an issue with the right fighter, but maybe not big enough of an issue above his offensive output.
Mm-hmm.
So Nakatani was able to throw multiple shots, and it's no different than what David Benavidez did with Ramirez. Ramirez had a high guard, couldn't see punches coming, and David Benavidez would just well on him. And so I'm saying this could be an issue for Inoue if that's his main go-to for defense. Like, I mean, you should move with it. If you're gonna do that, you got to move. You just can't sit there and be a boxing bag. It was a good fight. I remember Nakatani being proud of himself, which he should be proud of himself. But to y'all's point, to Zoe's point, he had to sell out to make it competitive. And at some point, when the championship rounds came, he didn't sell out enough, which is what JR said.
Yeah.
So while I get it, he does have the right to be proud of himself. Like, he could have gave us more, but he was fine with just accepting I did well. And I know I'm gonna lose a fight, but I did well. He was fine with that.
Yeah.
But should a fighter have that mentality?
It reminded me of the third fight between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, where it looked like, at the end of the fight, like Amanda Serrano was just, happy that, went through another 12 rounds, and that she, kind of like made it through the 12 rounds. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I said, if it's something when you have so much on the line and you have the opportunity to, be the best fighter, you could beat the best fighter. Some might say the best fighter in the planet. You're gonna have to, do a couple of things to, really set yourself apart. And I didn't really see that there from Junto Nakatani, but I don't know. Maybe he'll look at what's going on, and then go back to the drawing board and see what else happens there on that front. You know what I mean? But I just feel like after that round 9 or something like that, I thought he would have tried to see if he could press action a little bit more, but he didn't do that.
And we're not saying, because I mean he did decent, like he did better than most people do against Inoue. At the same time, with like JR said, with everything on the line, you're pushing him back with all of this that's happening. You gotta go for more. You gotta bet a little bit more for the opportunity to win something that most people will never get in a lifetime.
Yeah, that obviously that was just not in his character to do that, right? And you would think it would be once again recognizing the moment you're fighting in your home country in front of that huge crowd of people, right? With both people rooting for both sides. It's once again, it's an opportunity to be great. And like you just said, Mike, right now, how often will you even get that chance to fight for some of that magnitude, right? So I'm saying when you see that, you have to go and seize the moment. When we give it to you, and once again, boxing is not a sport that we play. You have to fight for every inch and ounce of respect in that ring for the accolades that come with that. So it's just I'm not, and once again, both these guys were 32-0, so it's not like he's lacking in experience. He has experience, right? I don't know. As for now, he lost a 0, and that would definitely be a learning lesson for him in that regard.
At some point, his range was giving Inoue a little issue.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like, his stock doesn't drop per se, because I mean he did decent enough to where people are going to want to see him fight other guys. At the same time, as Terrell, as JR, as other people said, you got to go for broke. If you fighting this guy, you got to give it your all. People may criticize Deontay Wilder, but yeah, well, I'm about to use another fighter because I mean a couple fights, his mentality was different. I'm just saying you got to go for it. That's all.
Yeah. No doubt. Now I was seeing if yeah, my guy Zoe was able to get in the building, but he had like hit me up on a messenger or whatever it is, and he gave his thing here for the scorecards and whatnot. So he had like in a way winning the first 5 rounds and Nakatani having like 3 overall. So he had it like 9 rounds to 3 in favor of Naoya Inoue. So kind of like see it around like that range, like 9-3 or maybe 8-4, but nothing where you could kind of see after like the first 5, not the first 5, maybe the first 6 or 8 rounds that the fight was in the balance. I think that Inoue had like a pretty comfortable lead at that point. It was just that Nakatani didn't make that adjustment until like the 9th round, and by that time it could have been like too late. You know what I mean? Uh, Shout out to Adam Hurley on the live chat talking about the thing there with Benavidez versus Zurdo with T-Mobile Arena. He says that Canelo's greatest footwork was walking out of that fight last night. Oh, come on, man. Oh, damn. Yeah, but like we were saying, man, that fight is like out the window, man. I've said it before, like if it didn't happen in 2023 after Benavidez beat Plant and Canelo made the move to try to have a 3-fight deal, and his first opponent was at the time set up to be Jermall Charlo. Once that was made, then yeah, you could pretty much like kiss that goodbye there. But back to this thing here with Inoue and Nakatani, it which just shows that like with Inoue, he just showed his level of experience there. As I said, I posted this earlier and it said like Naoya Inoue is 28-0 in world title fights. Once again, 28-0. He's had 33 professional fights. And up to his like 6th pro fight, he was able to fight for a world title. And he's had world championship fights from 2014 up until now. Over 12 years in world championship fights. That's insane. That's insane. But, some people might, have some criticisms of, fights in those, lower weight classes and things like that. But, at least here with Naoya Inoue, whatever weight class he is in, he was, looking for the fights against the top guys there within those weight classes and was able to beat them. So that's why, they could make a case for him being at number 1 pound for pound right now, as we mentioned earlier with Alexander Usyk having his fight over in Egypt, over in Egypt. You know what I mean? So you could make a case, at least there, for Naoya Inoue to being number 1 pound for pound here currently. Still working on this thing here with Zoe. What you got?
How long has Nakatani been at the weight class?
That's the thing. It's been his 2nd fight.
Yeah.
He had the first bout against Sebastian Hernandez Reyes over in Saudi Arabia, as the pretty much the co-feature to win. Naoya Inoue had his last defense of those super bantamweight titles. So that was like his 2nd fight at super bantamweight. So I don't know if it was something where maybe he needed a couple more fights within that division, but they were just saying, hey, after like a year ago, when Inoue had his defense, I think it was it September? Yeah, like he had fought MJ Akhmadaliev in September last year, and at that time they were making the intentions of having that fight between Inoue and Nakatani. So they were like saying, okay, Nakatani, have a fight, there at 122, and that was in December. And after that, we make this fight between, y'all two. So they were just, making the moves to making sure that they have that fight happen, as soon as possible. Because who knows what's going to be happening next year with Naoya Inoue. I don't know if he's going to be moving up to 126, but at this point, it's like, what else can you do at 122 pounds?
Well, so I said that to say this, right? So even today on Twitter, Ring Magazine made a post saying that Turkey's going to be making moves to make Bam Rodriguez versus Inoue for the next fight from whatever date. I'm like, pump the brakes, first of all, right? Bam got a fight coming up. Even Bam just had an interview where he said, yes, he does want to fight. He's not doctor does. He's not even in the weight class yet. He's not in the weight class yet.
Yeah.
Right? And on top of that, Bam has options where he's at right now to either move up or unify, things like that. So, I mean, Inoue is great. Like I said, dude is 28-0 in championship fights. That's unheard of, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's no need to just try to force fit Bam Inoue fight. I mean, we all want to see that when the time is right, right? And that's what I would say. Let that fight keep marinating because both of these guys are having success in their respective weight classes. But don't put one guy at a disadvantage and like that. Don't do that. This is not cool. And also they said that the fight was going to be in Japan, which once again you're further at a disadvantage. But Bam, to his credit, if that fight does happen, he will go to Japan. But once again, he's not even in the weight class yet.
Yeah. And the thing with Bam Rodriguez, that had been like a point of criticism for him, in a sense that he had been bouncing back and forth between 118 and 115, if I'm not mistaken, because he had been like a unified champ at super flyweight. He had been there at like flyweight. He beat those guys that were part of that previous era of super flyweight, right? And then after doing that, he would go back down to flyweight and then like have bouts against Christian Gonzalez and then Sonny Edwards before going back up to super flyweight and having his fight against Juan Francisco Estrada or something like that. So he's been like a unified champion in the flyweight and the super flyweight divisions, but it's like okay, he's doing that like a step below, like 112 and 115 are the weight limits for that. Now he's just getting into the point where he's in the bantamweight division, which is 118. And now you're saying that, oh, after having this one fight, or maybe if you have time, two fights at like 118, or maybe one fight at 118 and then one fight at 122, then you're going to have him go up against Iowa in a way. Like, come on, man. What are we doing? I mean, but, like Zoe was talking about, Turkey Al-Sheikh would like to announce nonsense to try to, upstage events, and that's what, he was trying to do there this weekend because, all the attention was out there for Las Vegas as far as like, that bout because you had David Benavidez there. It was, PBC working there with Golden Boy Promotions. You had, Oscar De La Hoya out there, working like a promoter, being visible and everything like that. He didn't necessarily, have to do his all that type of stuff. He didn't really have to do that. All he had to do was just show up and be the guy to be accessible, to media, to, fans and that type of stuff. And that's what he was doing, during that week, props to him on that. But, on the flip side with Turkey, it's like, yeah, why are you announcing fights that one might not even happen? And then two, if you're saying that it's going to happen, we're about, over 6 months away. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, why he would kind of like do that, but he just wants to, be on the front thing there for him. You know what I'm saying? Damn, I don't know what's up with this thing here, man. Zoe trying to, jump on this thing here, but let me see if I could try something else because I might be able to, see if it could send a link out to him or another link and see if it works.
Yeah,
But
just fine. I don't even try on the phone anymore. I just jump on the computer. That's all I do.
Yeah, you got to do the open from desktop option.
Yeah, open from desktop. It don't look like the phone joint be working like that or working all too hot. I don't know why, but hey, I don't know. I'm gonna hit them up and be like, yo, y'all gonna have to fix that up there a little bit to see what's going on with all of that. Yeah. With that being said, I wanted to also talk about one joint that did happen on that day there over in Las Vegas. We did have a press conference out there, before those fights happened at T-Mobile Arena, and it involved the Truth, Errol Spence Jr. and Tim Tszyu. They did make the announcement that they will be having a fight will be scheduled for, as they say, from a time perspective, July 26th over in Australia live. But by the time it's live in Australia, it'll be July 26th. Us over here, it'll still be July 25th. So we're gonna have that fight there between these two guys. And one thing that stood out to me was that it was going to be at a catch weight of, I think it's like 158, because it didn't say it would be like, there ain't at no 160. It ain't like 156. It's gonna be a 158 there, which kind of like interests me because in Tim Tszyu's last fight, he fought for and won the WBO Global Middleweight Championship. So once they had that fight and it was over with, I thought, hey, if you're trying to pin this WBO Global Middleweight title on him, then maybe they could try to make this be a fight at 160 pounds. But hey, they're just saying that this is just a catch weight bout, and they're having Errol Spence get back in the ring after 3 years inactivity and all that type of stuff, going up against Tim Tszyu, who had his fights against Bakur Murtazaliev and Sebastian Fundora, at the top level there at 154 pounds, but did have a recent bout there at 160 and was able to get a win. So he's kind of been getting used to having a new camp or a new trainer there in a sense. But with Errol Spence Jr. coming back after a long layoff, he's there with Coach Ronnie Shields now over in Houston, Texas. So that was one thing for him. And then the other joint was that he at least with Errol Spence Jr., he kind of like dismissed the comments about Tim Tszyu kind of like being comparable to his father there, Coach Tszyu. But there were like another few nuggets out there that I'll touch on here in a little bit. But what are y'all thoughts about this matchup coming up in July?
I want you to read Zoe's comment first before we say anything.
All right, let me run this thing here. Hold on. He says, unless what Spence is washed, the kangaroo he will beat the kangaroo.
Zoe is funny, boy. Zoe is funny. Hey, Zoe, we miss you, man. We miss you, man. We miss your
he's trying to get on, man.
your humor,
that,
man.
That whole fold joint, man. That fold joint on this be tripping, man. I don't know what's up with that, man.
Yeah, you got to do it from the desktop. I mean, I have the same sentiments as him. Errol Spence always had that Texas slow twang or whatever, but I just feel like it's just a tad bit slower in his approach now. So I want to know if Spence is okay. But if Spence is okay, yes, he will beat Tim Tszyu up. He should beat Tim Tszyu up. Old Spence beats Tim Tszyu up with his eyes closed. But how well is Spence? That's the big question. That has to always be the question.
Mm-hmm.
His speech is slower, in my opinion. Like something was off about his speech, more different than his normal like Texas twang. Like the chopped and screwed twang. It's something was different.
He explained that to a certain extent after the press conference when he was talking with multiple media members that were out there in Vegas. He said it was kind of like due to his grill and what he had to do with his teeth after the accident or something like that. So it kind of messes with his teeth a little bit. So yeah, he'll talk a little bit like this, like I forgot what the whole thing with the surgery was. It's almost like, what is it? Kanye West had it or something, where you could barely move your lips or whatever, and that type of thing. But if there was like anybody that could really assess what's going on, it's who he's with right now and Coach Ronnie Shields. He's there over in the gym in Texas, Houston, Texas. He's worked with, to a certain extent, people mention Jamal Charlo, but they also mention Brian Norman Jr. There, of course, former WBO welterweight champion. Who's there in a camp there in Houston as well. He's preparing for a bout that's May 16th over in Norfolk. So you got a number of guys that are out there, at Ronnie Shields' gym around that weight class, whether it's 147, 154, 160, 168, or whatever. So you would kind of like see what Spence could do. So he had like about maybe 7 to 10 days or so at the gym with Coach Ronnie. That was like a few weeks back before Ronnie had prepared Vito for his bout in New Jersey, and then now he's preparing Brian Norman Jr. for his fight, like I mentioned there for May 16th. But he's gonna kind of work with Errol Spence here for a time, and then see if he'll get him ready to be going out there in Australia. So from what he's seen initially, he feels like, yeah, Errol Spence is, able to keep up with, what needs to be done here because, a guy of Rodney Shields' experience, he's been in the game for decades. He would kind of like see, if Errol Spence is properly ready, for it or not. You know what I mean? You got anything on it there, Terrell?
Yeah, honestly, just as a box fan, I'm glad to see Spence back because he had a great body of work in his title run at 147 and dominance at 147. And yeah, he's definitely dominant at 147 prior to the Crawford fight. I'm just glad to see the dude back. So, but as we always say, him coming back now, he has so many questions to answer now, right? And particularly, like for me, like why is he coming back, right? We saw that the last few years. He just always documented on social media, like just doing family time, family things like that. And we know that's also a big part of your mental health, which is big these days, right? Recovering from because that was honestly the way Crawford beat him up and beat him down. That was a devastating loss to him. It was probably more so than he would never admit publicly like that. But now he's coming back. But why is he coming back? Coming back for what? Even in some of his comments, he said, "Well, I'm not necessarily I look for title belts like that." He just said, I look for big fights." So I mean, obviously, a big fight's gonna be a championship fight at some point in time if he does continue to win and how he wins things like that. And with his name, he will be positioned for belts. And really, fighting at a catchweight of 158, we know what weight class is right there, middleweight, and middleweight now is barren of names for
Yeah.
that division. So if that's and matter of fact, Adam is already gone. Janback's probably still suspended. I don't know who in the hell else is at uh, middleweight besides what's my boy name? The Cuban boy. What's his name?
Well, you got Erislandy Lara as a world champion, and you
Yeah,
got as a
yeah.
contender there, Yuwenli Hernandez, who I mentioned earlier. But they also do have their Jesus Ramos, who probably will be contending for a world championship since Adamas has like made his announcement to move up to 168. So um, I wouldn't mind that for Errol Spence there. In comparison to 154 for multiple reasons. But at least when he was like active, when I talk about Errol Spence in those last like few years or so before he was inactive, he had to work a little bit in order to make 147 pounds. And as I was mentioning earlier, there with like a David Benavidez or a lot of these guys that could be, as they say, in the upper age group or something like that. Whether you like hit the 3-0 or not, or you're close to it, the longer you're there in the game, the harder it is to cut weight. So I think here with Errol Spence, if he's able to do his thing and make it for at least here with this bout around like 158 or whatever it is, then like say, hey, you know what? Let's see if I could do something here at 160. I wouldn't mind it. If he has this win over Tim Tszyu and does a very good job there, I say, hey, why not? 154 again. You would have to do some work in order to get down to 154, especially when you've been inactive for a good amount of time, like he has been. So I want to see what he does here first against Tim Tszyu, and then after that, maybe see about him competing at 160 pounds.
Even with the fighting Tszyu, I think that's a carefully picked out opponent. once again, matchmaking comes into play. Tszyu has a name. Tszyu has a good following down under. We know that. But at this point, with Tszyu's matchmaking, when he fought Fundura and those other people like that, that probably was a bad style matchup for him right there. So I'm not saying he's shot, but he's shot in a sense in that regard. And so he's a perfect opponent for Spence coming back. Once again, has a name. But I think we all know the outcome of this coming up fight. We know that despite the fact that Spence has so many questions to answer for us, is he in shape? Does he still have it? Does he still have his best attributes that he had at 147? Just being sharp, things like that, and being a killer. So,
Yeah, the thing with Tim Tszyu, as he's had those losses to Sebastian Fundora, and also with the Bakamurder Zalia fight, he's kind of had a point of reassessment, especially after his second loss to Sebastian Fundora. So he, changed his camp up here for his last couple of fights. He had, a bout against Anthony Velasquez last year, before the end of last year, and then the recent bout that he had against Dennis Nerja last month. And in that sense, he's kind of like saying, okay, this is kind of like my style. This is what I could be comfortable with, and at that time he was looking, forward to about there with Errol Spence Jr. So, with it being, official now, we have to see like how Tim Tszyu approaches this against a fighter of Errol Spence's caliber. Whether it's the Spence that we've seen in his peak or whatever. At least over the years in history, I've been very critical of Tim Tszyu. I haven't really like been high on him. Competing there at the time in the 154-pound division. I thought he would be like a step below, maybe a Sebastian Fundora, but even at the time, he was competing when Jermell Charlo was like a unified and then eventually an undisputed champion. And I was like, you know what? When Tim Tszyu was a contender or coming up as a contender at that point, I didn't really feel like he was a guy that could really challenge Jermell Charlo at the time. So guys that have been like at that high level, whether it's at 147 or 154 or whatever, and you're kind of like been performing at like a shade down, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily favor you against a guy that level in Errol Spence. When Tim Tszyu did have like a world championship or whatnot, like he was fighting, the Terrell Gauchers, and yeah, he had to win over Tony Harrison, but at that time, Tony Harrison, had those stoppage losses. So when Tim Tszyu did have the win over Brian Mendoza, yeah, Brian Mendoza did beat Fundora, but hey, sometimes styles make fights. And when Tim Tszyu fought Fundora the first time after, the blood and all that type of stuff, then he couldn't necessarily get the win there. And then it affected him for his fight against Bakamurder Zalia, and he hasn't really been the same since. And I seen him, on that telecast there for, the fights in Las Vegas, and it looked like he had something below his eye. So I'm watching out for that as well here in his preparation for his bout against Errol Spence Jr. So I mean that's like mainly what I had there as far as like what's coming up for that particular bout. It's been I've been on for about 2 hours and 30 minutes here for this extended portion of the Boxing Source podcast. We have a few fights that we're looking forward to here for this upcoming week. This weekend, we do have that heavyweight world title bout that's coming up for the WBO heavyweight championship. Fabio Wardley versus Daniel Dubois. That's going to be something there to look forward to. We do have Angelo Leo versus Rais Salim. I should have inquired about seeing if I could have got Boxing Academic to cover that or something. I don't know. But yeah, that's coming up this weekend here on Saturday over in the Atlanta area. But we got a few fights here to look forward to. This is kind of like the start of the the late spring, early summer months. So we got a number of good events that's still here on the schedule. I think 2026 in the sport of boxing has been very, very, very good. Kind of like reminds me of the year of 2023 where we had a lot of great bouts or great matchups or ones that did get announced. So it's looking like we're going to have the same thing here in 2026. So definitely looking forward to that. You know what I'm saying? But that's mainly what I have here on this sense. Any closing remarks here from either y'all?
Yeah, real quick for me, Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya in particular, right? Looks like he's extended a olive branch out to Ortiz Jr. and his camp. Uh, really, I hope something can come out of that, right? Because we don't. I mean, how many times have we seen in the past? Let's see, Andre Ward. What's
Yeah,
Garcia? What's the fighter from what? Top rank Mexican kid. Garcia, right?
Mikey Garcia.
Yeah.
Mikey Garcia.
Yeah, it makes zero sense for you to be sending out for legal reasons in the prime of your career, right? And now look what we
Yeah.
got happening. Zayas, Boots, I got Fundursa out there so active, and you got all these great fights are happening right now, and you're sitting out because of legal reasons. So I really commend. I hope it's not just 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 bullshit. Hope that something can really come out of that. They can get back together. But even though I'm pessimistic on this one because Ortiz still has the same manager, right? But even despite that, because bottom line, you got to grab the bull by the horn and say, fuck all this bullshit, man. Get me a fight and something. I mean, even if it's not a top level fight, no, you need to be back in the scene. So I hope that something can really come out of that. I hope that Oscar's not just really bullshitting like that. Honestly, it makes sense for both sides. I mean, even with McGee having a belt now, they got more exposure now. But it just makes sense for Ortiz to be fighting. It makes sense. Get it done.
My thing with him is Virgil Ortiz. That is, if Oscar De La Hoya has said something that maybe they work something out with Virgil Ortiz, at least for me on my end, I think it happens if Ortiz doesn't have his manager or if he fires his manager. Because the whole thing about Virgil Ortiz and what ended up happening there with Boots and whatever, that was mainly his manager that did that. He kind of stepped away from what was agreed to from the promotional rights board. So because of that, that's why he had this whole thing with the lawsuit. But hey, the judge there, they looked at what was going on and they said, hey, nah, this is Golden Boy. We're deciding in the favor of Golden Boy in this, and because of that, now you got Virgil Ortiz kind of sitting out, and you're trying to talk about this whole thing with arbitration, at least from a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, why go through arbitration when all you got to do is just try to work something out to where you could still, fall under the promotional rights agreement, see if you could get a fight, done or get a fight worked out, whether it's going to be before the time that your year ends or not, and then see what happens after that. But I just felt like, them trying to overstep their boundaries and trying to have that fight happen between Virgil Ortiz and Boots Ennis, that really cost Virgil Ortiz Jr. here. And so even with all of that, you could still have Virgil Ortiz potentially facing like a Sebastian Fundora, as you mentioned. You got Fundora as the WBC Super Welterweight Champion. You got Virgil Ortiz Jr. as the interim WBC Super Welterweight Champion. So why not see if you could pursue that particular fight, make that fight happen? And hey, wait a minute. If I'm not mistaken, Virgil Ortiz is there with Golden Boy Promotions, and Sebastian Fundora is there. That's under, as they say, PBC, but he's under Samson Boxing. Wait a minute. What just happened here yesterday? We had, Zurdo Ramirez is there under Golden Boy Promotions. And David Benavidez was there pretty much around with Samson Boxing, right? Okay. So we're kind of seeing these promotional companies working together in a sense. So we could see it probably one more time. And hey, it wouldn't surprise me if those type of talks were happening, during the fight week, that hey, Golden Boy and Oscar De La Hoya was saying, hey, I mean, this is looking good. How we're working together and putting these events together. Let's see if we could do it one more time with Sebastian Fundora and Virgil Ortiz Jr. Whether it's it wouldn't. I don't know. Yeah, it would be kind of like you know, as I was mentioning, Samson, or you would have Luis the Cuba Senior or Junior, involved in it or something like that. But we're kind of like seeing that type of direction with some people saying PBC, where it's more of like Luis the Cubas Junior and Senior, and you're seeing those fighters like the David Benavidez, the Sebastian Vendoras, and the like being featured here in a sense. So we might see that here once again with Sebastian Fundora, and he had the win over Keith Thurman on March 30th, and he looked to be active once again. He could have had 3 fights last year, so he could do it here again this year. We could see Sebastian Fundora back in the ring, in the summer or something like that. So hey, maybe that opens the door for a potential fight between Sebastian Fundora and Virgil Ortiz Jr. later this year. So we'll see how that goes on that. I don't know, academic. You had something there before we close it. I would see if you did or not.
Nothing really. No, nothing really.
All right, gotcha. Yeah. So that kind of like wraps it up here for this edition of the Boston Source Podcast. Like I was saying here at the beginning, man. This is the first episode of season 11. So yeah, so we've had pretty much like 10 years completed and all that type of stuff here, plus for the Boston Source Podcast, man. So I'll just try as much as I can to be as consistent as possible. Providing podcasts for y'all. To be able to listen in and check out, to be able to comment on and all that type of stuff. Be able to chime in if you can here within the live podcast here. But as always, there's things that we try to build here for the Boston Source here. So we got a number of things here that we're gonna try to provide for y'all, whether it's through the podcast or through the YouTube channel or through Rumble. If you're on through Rumble as well. But over the years, we've had the support. We've been having interviews that's happened over the years as well. Like even with the very first like special guest that we had, Zab Judah, back in 2015. So we've had a number of fighters, come on here, promoters, even organization presidents and stuff like that. That's been part of the interviews that I've been able to secure here over these years, and we look to do more here with the Boston Source. And I think everyone that's been able to be a part of it here through the years, especially, my day ones here with the Box Academic and Brother Terrell here that's been joining me on this journey here. But that's, me wrapping it up here for this edition of the Boston Source Podcast. We'll be able to catch y'all here with the midweek report scheduled for Wednesday evening. Until then, I'll catch y'all later, man. Peace out.